They found her lying on the church steps like she'd been placed there, peaceful, dressed in black and holding a secret no one claimed. I was supposed to walk away. Another unsolved case. But something in her silence grabbed me, and what I uncovered made me question everything I thought I'd buried. The call came in at 6:42 a.m. just as the city started pretending it was holy. A body on the steps of St. Augustine's off Fifth Avenue. Female. No blood. No signs of trauma. That's how they said it. Like it mattered. Like that made it less dead. I pulled up 20 minutes later. Morning light bouncing off the limestone like guilt. The streets were clean. Too clean. Delivery trucks just beginning to clog the avenues, joggers pretending to outrun something. No one noticed the figure in black on the steps. Maybe they thought she was praying, or sleeping, or worse, part of the city's furniture. She wasn't. She was dressed like she had somewhere important to be. Black coat, tailored, hair pinned tight, shoes polished like she cared what the ground thought of her. One white glove. Only one. On the left hand. The right one bare. Fingers curled like she'd been holding something that got taken away. And then the ring. Gold. Old. Worn smooth at the edges. It didn't match anything. Not her clothes, not her makeup. Not the style of the coat. I've seen women dressed to the nines before doing something final. But this wasn't that. This wasn't desperation. This was ritual. The coroner stood next to me, arms crossed. No trauma, he said again, like he was trying to convince himself. No blood, no bruising, no ID. But that wasn't what got me. What got me was her expression, peaceful, almost expectant, like she came to that spot to be found, not saved, just seen. The hands were folded, legs crossed at the ankle, like someone had placed her there gently, with care, with intent. I crouched next to her, looked at the face. Late 40s, maybe early 50s. Beautiful, but not loud about it. The kind of face that used to laugh a lot, but hadn't in a while. Lipstick faint, like it had been kissed off hours ago. No purse, no phone, no smudges on her coat, no track marks, no scent of alcohol or pills. Just cold skin, a single white glove, and a ring that felt like a question. Something about it didn't make sense. People don't die like this in Midtown, not on church steps, not without a noise. But there she was. Quiet, delivered, like a story someone didn't want to finish but couldn't bear to keep writing. I scanned the crowd. Cameras everywhere, but all pointed the wrong direction. That's the trick with this city. It documents everything, except what matters. Dispatch wanted a statement. I didn't give them one. Not yet. Not until I figured out who she was, and why everything about her presence screamed presence, but nothing about her identity wanted to be known. I didn't know her name, but I knew one thing already. She wasn't lost, she was left. It stayed with me after she was gone, the shape of her, the way her body rested like a sculpture someone had poured memory into. That doesn't happen by chance. That's not how people collapse. That's not how death shows up in this city. It usually hits like a car crash, messy, fast, loud. But she didn't fall. She was placed, arranged, deliberate. It was in the angle of her chin, turned just slightly to the right, in the way her legs crossed like she was waiting for a train, the way her left hand, the gloved one, rested on her lap like it had practiced being still. That kind of calm doesn't belong to someone caught off guard. It belongs to someone who made a decision, someone who knew how this story would end. And her shoes. That's what did it for me. Clean, polished, black leather with just the right heel. Not too high, not meant to flirt. Just meant to carry a woman somewhere important. No scuffs, no wear on the soles. She hadn't walked far, not in those. Which meant someone brought her. Or she changed before stepping out. Either way, she came here with purpose. I asked the priest if they'd seen her before. He said no, not at confession, not at service. But the woman who lit candles early in the week, the one who left a note last spring, might have been her. He wasn't sure. Just remembered the gloves. Said most people pray with open hands. She didn't. She prayed like she was bargaining. We took her prints, ran them through every database I could get my hands on. Nothing. Not a single ping. No driver's license, no criminal history, no missing persons report matching her face. As far as the city was concerned, she didn't exist. That made me angry, because everything about her screamed existence. Her posture was memory, her dress was intention, the ring was a message, and messages don't come from ghosts. I sat in my car that night with the radio off, windows cracked, trying to think like her. What kind of woman chooses the front steps of a church as her last stage? What kind of person folds themselves into a scene this carefully unless they need to be seen? She wasn't trying to disappear. That was clear. She could have vanished if she wanted to. Changed her face, ditched the ring, slipped into one of the city's black holes. But instead, she chose Fifth Avenue, a church with marble steps, a street lined with wealth and stories people pretend to forget. That wasn't random. That was a spotlight. But I still didn't know what she wanted me to see. Not yet. All I knew was this. Someone had loved her once. Maybe still did. Enough to dress her like a memory. Enough to stage her last breath like a performance. And whoever it was, they weren't done talking. It caught me off guard the second time I saw her. Not in the moment. Not when I stood over her body that morning. No, it was hours later, back at the precinct, flipping through the crime scene photos. There was a still frame where the light hit her just right. Her head tilted toward the lens, one side shadowed, the other catching the soft morning reflection off the marble. That's when it happened. The feeling, not a name, not an ID, just something familiar. It wasn't like seeing an old friend. It wasn't warmth. It was ache. Like hearing a song you'd forgotten you knew, one you only remember because it used to hurt. I stared at that photo longer than I should have, and the more I stared, the more I started pulling at old threads. It wasn't her eyes, or her lips, or the angle of her jaw. It was the way she held her stillness, like she'd trained herself not to move unless it mattered. I dug into the archives, not the digital ones, the real ones. Basement-level stuff. Yellowed paper, manila folders, the kind of case files that don't show up in databases because someone didn't want them to. I knew the cabinet I needed before I even knew why I was looking. 4 drawers down, third from the left. Cold cases. 1990 to 2000. Handwritten index tabs. I pulled the folder without thinking. Evelyn Cross, missing person. 1996. Jazz singer, vanished after a show in the West Village. Never found, no suspects, no body. Declared dead in absentia 5 years later. File closed. The photo inside stopped my breath. It wasn't her. Not exactly. But it was close enough to set every nerve on edge. Same bone structure, same eyes, though younger, defiant, unburdened. Hair longer then, smile wider. But that face, it belonged to the same bloodline. A sister, maybe. A daughter. Or maybe Evelyn Cross never died at all. Maybe she just waited for the city to forget before she came back. I hadn't looked at that file in over a decade. We were told to forget about it. Word came from upstairs. Let it go. No suspects. No foul play confirmed. But even back then, something about it felt off. A disappearance with no leads, no cameras, no motive. Just a woman who stepped off stage and never came back. Now I was staring at her echo on the steps of a church. It couldn't be coincidence. Not in this city. Not when everything else about her screamed choreography. The problem was, if this woman was Evelyn, or even connected to her, then someone went to a lot of trouble to keep her story buried. And now someone else had brought it back to the surface. Not loud, not dramatic. Just quiet and final. Like a whisper meant only for the one detective too stubborn to stop listening. It was the rain that kept tugging at me. Not the downpour kind. Just that cold, steady drizzle that slicks the pavement and makes every footstep sound like a secret. The kind that turns a polished city into something honest. And she was lying right in the middle of it, dry as confession. Her coat was soaked by the time we found her, but everything underneath, still pressed, still clean, still untouched. That didn't fit. I walked the block 3 times that afternoon, talked to every vendor, every doorman, every early riser with a memory worth anything. None of them remembered her walking up. No umbrella, no cab drop. No one saw a woman in black climbing the steps to St. Augustine's in the middle of the rain. And she didn't live nearby. That part I was sure of. This was Fifth Avenue. You don't just wander up here unnoticed. Not looking like that. Not alone. Not without purpose. She wore a formal dress beneath her coat. Deep navy blue, silk or something close to it. Hem just below the knee. Heels to match. Nothing flashy, but intentional. The kind of dress you wear to be remembered, not seen. And it didn't make sense. Not for the weather, not for the hour, not for death. The temperature had dropped to the mid-40s that morning. She had no scarf, no hat, no gloves, except the one. White, perfect, still pristine on her left hand, as if it had never been touched by the world. I checked nearby businesses, security cameras. Nothing caught her. No timestamp, no reflection in the glass, no passing glance. The kind of absence that feels planned. The kind of silence that isn't quiet at all. It's curated. You don't dress like that unless you want to be remembered exactly as you are in that moment. That's what kept echoing in my head. This wasn't someone trying to disappear. This was someone staging a farewell. But there was no note, no message, just the dress, the glove, the ring, and the feeling that someone had helped her make it to that final step, then vanished. I kept thinking about the neckline of that dress. Elegant, but modest, like it came from another era. Something a woman might have worn to a wake for someone she used to love, or maybe her own. And that coat. It wasn't for the weather. It was for the look, like she'd chosen to freeze before she'd cover the outfit with something practical. That told me everything I needed to know. She didn't come here to survive the storm. She came here knowing it would rain. And still, she dressed like someone who knew this would be the last time the city ever looked at her. That wasn't accident. That was design. And I needed to know who helped her draw the blueprint. I couldn't stop staring at the glove. White, clean. Too clean. Like it had been ironed or handled with care right up to the end. Not a trace of dirt on it, even after lying on wet stone steps for hours. The stitching was perfect. No fray, no wear. I've seen gloves before. Cheap ones, expensive ones, ceremonial ones. But this was different. Handmade. Maybe even one of a kind. The kind of thing you commission, not pick off a rack. And the ring. That was the puzzle piece that didn't want to fit. Gold, but not shiny. Dull, soft edges, worn from years of wear, maybe decades. It wasn't engraved, no name, no date, just a simple loop of time worn smooth by habit. Left hand, fourth finger, no question what it meant. But if it was a wedding band, there was no husband on record, no matching prints, no sign that anyone had come forward to claim her, or the ring. She didn't belong to anyone, or no one wanted to admit that she did. I took the glove to a friend at Midtown Forensics, asked if she could trace the material. Cotton blend, high thread count. The kind used in custom tailoring, often from Europe. There was a faint smell of lavender inside. Faint, but not natural. Fabric spray. Another detail that didn't belong to chaos. I started with the obvious. Tailors who specialize in bespoke gloves. Midtown, Upper West, even out in Brooklyn. Took me 6 hours and 23 polite rejections before I walked into a narrow shop on 58th and Madison, tucked between a bookstore and a boutique that only sold white shirts. The man behind the counter didn't flinch when I pulled out the glove. Didn't even ask what it was for. "I made this," he said before I opened my mouth. "How sure are you?" "I only make gloves for 5 people. I remember the hands." I nodded. "You remember hers?" "She came in on Wednesdays, noon always, never late, never early." "You know her name?" He shook his head. "She never gave it." "What did she say?" "Nothing, just measurements, fit preferences, paid in cash, always wore black." He walked into the back and returned with a tiny notebook, flipped it open to a page labeled simply W. Her hand measurements were written in careful script. Dates of appointments, 5 visits, 5 Wednesdays, last one 2 weeks ago. She ever mentioned the ring? He hesitated. "Only once. Asked if gloves should fit over it." "Did she take them off?" "No. Said it needed to stay on. Said it was part of the look." I thanked him and left, glove in pocket, questions multiplying like shadows. She wasn't hiding. She was rehearsing, coming in like clockwork, perfecting the way it all would end. The glove, the ring, the posture. Every detail rehearsed, refined, made to look effortless. This wasn't a cry for help. It was a quiet kind of performance. And someone had been in the front row all along. There's a point in every case where the person stops being a body and starts being a presence. For me, it was the second time someone called her the woman in black. Different people, different boroughs, same phrase. The jazz bar in Chelsea, the florist near Central Park, the tailor on 58th. They didn't know her name, but they remembered her, because she made them remember. Cash only, always exact, always folded. She never asked for receipts, never stayed long enough to make small talk. Didn't smile, didn't frown, just existed, like a shadow that chose where it wanted to land. I started calling her Wednesday's woman, because that's when she showed up. Every lead I followed, every stop she made, it always came back to a Wednesday. Like she carved a space into that day and refused to let it belong to anything else. A week could fall apart around her, but Wednesdays, those were hers. The tailor told me she came at noon. The florist said 2 p.m., never later. The bartender at Louis' said she'd appear just before sunset, sit at the end of the bar, order a single drink, neat, and leave a tip like she'd won the lottery. Always in black. Not the glamorous kind. Not mourning either. Somewhere in between. Like she was dressing for a funeral that hadn't happened yet but was on the books. What struck me was how little anyone knew. No name, no contact info, no story, just glimpses. And yet, no one forgot her. Not one person shrugged and said, "I don't know." They all remembered, because she made them feel something. It wasn't fear, it wasn't warmth, it was presence. You could feel it even in the rooms she'd left behind. Like perfume without a source. Like piano notes still hanging in the air after the last key's been played. Wednesday's woman didn't live loud, but she left fingerprints in people's memories. And that's what I started following. The florist said she always bought the same flowers. White lilies, 6 stems, wrapped in brown paper, never a card. The bartender said she always sat in the same seat, left her lipstick on the rim of the glass, and never stayed past the second track on the jukebox. The tailor said she never let him measure her twice, said her hands hadn't changed. That kind of control doesn't come from someone lost. It comes from someone who's trying not to be forgotten, but only by one person. Everyone else was collateral. I kept staring at the ring on her hand, wondering if it was his, if he still wore the match, if there even was a match. Maybe he was dead. Maybe he left. Or maybe he'd see her face in the morning news, recognize the glove, the coat, the street, and know this whole thing was meant for him. Wednesday's woman didn't just vanish. She left the city a question it didn't know how to ask, and somehow, I'd become the one expected to answer it. I went back to the church the next morning before the media found a name to invent for her. The scene was cleared, polished, like nothing ever happened. You wouldn't know someone died there unless you felt it in the stone. Some places carry that kind of weight. Quiet, cold, impossible to wash out. I found the janitor near the side entrance dragging a mop like it had betrayed him. He was thin, mid-20s, headphones in, humming something gospel-adjacent. Didn't flinch when I said NYPD, just nodded toward the vestibule. "You here last night?" I asked. "Until 2, he said, not looking up. "Always stay late before morning mass. Make sure the steps are clean." "Did you see her?" That made him pause. He leaned against the mop handle, eyes narrowing. "You mean the woman in the coat?" I nodded. "Yeah, she came in late, just before we locked up." "What did she do?" "Lit a candle, sat in the back, didn't move for an hour." "Did she speak to anyone?" "Nope, just sat there, straight spine, hands folded in her lap, like she was listening for something." "She pray?" He shook his head. "Not like the others. No signs of the cross, no whispering. She just stared." "At what?" He looked at me like it was obvious. "The altar." I followed his gaze. There was nothing unusual about it. Gold trim, white cloth, simple cross. But I understood what he meant. Some people don't come to churches for comfort. They come for confrontation, to look something in the eye. Maybe God, maybe guilt. "Did she cry?" I asked. He hesitated, then shook his head. That's what was weird. She looked calm, not sad, not angry, Just waiting. Waiting for what? I don't know, he said. Forgiveness, maybe. Or permission. That landed heavy. What time did she leave? Midnight. Right when the bell chimed. You sure? Positive. I was checking the locks when I heard it. She say anything at all? He nodded slowly. One thing, as she walked past me. What? He looked down at his hands. She said, he never showed. That sat between us like a third person. I didn't ask who he was. I already had guesses. A lover, a partner. Maybe someone who made promises in that very pew decades ago and never came back to keep them. She leave anything behind? I asked. He shook his head. Just the candle, still burning when I came back in. Most folks light one and walk away. She watched hers burn almost all the way down. I thanked him and walked back toward the aisle where she'd sat. Last pew on the right. The kind of spot you choose when you don't want to be seen, but hope someone notices anyway. The wax was still there, hardened, pale white against the dark wood. She didn't cry, didn't confess. She just watched something burn and waited for a ghost that never came. And somehow, I was the one left to pick up his silence. I found the place by accident, wasn't even on my list. Just a flicker in the corner of a note I took from the tailor, the kind of half-thought that doesn't make sense until it starts echoing. She'd mentioned a bar once, just once, said it was East, cheap, and forgettable. And that's exactly what I was looking for. It sat on the edge of the Upper East Side, where the old neighborhood still tried to pretend the world hadn't changed. Vinyl booths splitting at the seams. Lights too dim for ambiance, too bright for comfort. A dive in the truest sense. No name on the awning, just a red neon open in the window like it was daring you to walk in. I pushed through the door around 5 p.m. A few regulars nursed the same drinks they probably had yesterday. The bartender didn't look up until I sat down. Scotch, I said. Neat. He poured it without asking what kind. Respect. I showed him the photo. He didn't react right away, just stared. She dead? He asked. I nodded. He let out a breath like he'd been holding it for a year. Figured. You knew her? I didn't know her, but she came in. How often? Every month. Last Thursday, same time. 7 p.m. sat at the end of the bar, ordered one whiskey, never the same brand twice, and left a $100 tip. She say anything? He nodded slowly. One thing, every time. What? Make it neat. I don't want to spill what's left. That stopped me. He poured himself a drink, didn't offer to pay for it. She was one of those people who didn't take up space but made the room smaller just by sitting in it. Not in a bad way. Just, you couldn't ignore her. She ever talked to anyone? Nope, just stared at the jukebox. What song? Didn't play any, just stared. Like she was trying to remember something she couldn't afford to forget. Ever bring anyone with her? No. Anyone ever meet her here? He paused. Once, 2 months ago, man in a gray coat. Sat down next to her. Didn't order a drink. They didn't speak. You sure? I was watching. Whole bar got quieter. Not from fear. From respect. What happened after? He left. She stayed another 5 minutes. Didn't touch her drink. Did they touch? Hug? Kiss? Nope. No hands. No eyes. Just shared silence. Do you remember what he looked like? He rubbed his chin. Not really. Clean. Polished. Older. He looked like someone who used to be important and wanted to pretend he wasn't anymore. I left my card and finished the drink. That $100 tip. It wasn't a kindness. It was an apology. Or maybe a payment for silence. She didn't come to the bar to forget. She came to remember something no one else could see, and she wanted someone to know that remembering cost her something. I watched the footage 17 times, first for details, then for feeling. By the 5th loop, I stopped looking for the face and started watching the space between them. There's something about body language that doesn't lie, no matter how grainy the camera, no matter how practiced the silence. They weren't lovers, not anymore. They were something colder, more intimate, like two people who'd built a history they could no longer speak out loud. The tape came from the bar's back camera, Half obscured, low resolution, angle skewed. It didn't catch much, but it caught enough. She was already seated when he arrived. 7:03 p.m. Thursday night. She didn't flinch when he walked in, didn't smile, didn't greet him, just turned her head slightly, like she knew he'd show. He wore a gray trench coat, looked expensive, even in black and white. The collar was turned up, his face was angled away from the camera. He sat one stool over, close but not too close. No drink, no motion to order. He just sat, elbows on the bar, leaning in like he was listening to a ghost. They didn't touch, not once. That's what got to me. Not the absence of conversation, the absence of contact. There was distance between them, not the kind born of discomfort, but of damage. Like there was once a time they couldn't keep their hands off each other, and now, even a glance was a risk. At one point, she slid something across the bar to him. A napkin, maybe. Or a note. His fingers hesitated before picking it up. Then he folded it once, tucked it into his coat, and didn't look at it again. That moment, that tiny hesitation, told me everything. She trusted him, but she didn't believe in him anymore. He said one thing, just one. The camera caught his lips moving. No audio, just the motion. I brought in a lip reader. 2 different guesses. The first said it looked like, "You still can't forgive me." The second said, "I didn't think you'd come." Neither helped, both hurt. She didn't respond, just stared forward. Then, as if remembering she wasn't alone, stood up. Slow, deliberate, left her drink unfinished. He didn't stop her, just turned his head and watched her go. That was 2 months ago. She came back 3 more times, alone. He never returned. I asked the bartender if he'd ever seen the man before. He shook his head, said the guy looked like he used to be a detective, or a priest, or maybe both. I couldn't shake the feeling that what happened between them at that bar wasn't a conversation. It was a ritual, a final act of remembrance, a closing line to a story neither of them had the stomach to finish. And whatever she gave him that night, the note, the napkin, whatever it was, it never surfaced again, which means he still has it. And he's out there, listening to the same silence I am, pretending it doesn't mean anything. He found it 2 days after she died, said it had slipped behind the register, thin as breath, folded twice, barely stained. A napkin, cheap and wrinkled, the kind bartenders toss without a second glance. But this one, it had weight. A number scrawled in red. Lipstick, not ink. The kind of mark you leave when you want something remembered, not filed. He slid it across the counter like it might burn him. "This hers?" he asked. It was. No signature. Just 7 digits and a city code. No extra note, no arrow, no name. But the lipstick told me everything. She hadn't left that number in a rush. She'd pressed her mouth against the paper, then written the number slowly. You could see the drag where the wax clung to the napkin fibers. It wasn't sloppy. It was ceremonial. I ran the number through internal systems first. Nothing flagged, no recent activity. Then through utilities. Electric bills? None. Water? Cut off. Lease? Last registered tenant moved out 2 years ago. No forwarding address, no sublet, no listed owner. But the apartment still existed. Chelsea, West 22nd, 4th floor end of the hall. I went alone. Didn't call it in. Didn't need backup. This wasn't that kind of search. The building was one of those pre-war types you pass 100 times and never notice. Iron gate, buzzers with names scratched off, mailboxes that hadn't seen hands in years. The hallway smelled like time, that stale combination of old wood, old paint, and lives that used to echo. The lock wasn't broken, wasn't even dusty. It turned clean, which meant someone had been inside recently, not the landlord. He said no one had asked for the keys in 18 months, but someone had kept the place in check, barely. Inside, it was like a paused scene. One window cracked, curtain fluttering, a thin layer of dust over everything but the piano. Yeah, a piano. Upright against the far wall, keys exposed, bench pulled out like someone had just stood up. I walked through slow. No rush, no camera flashes, no gloves. I wasn't here for evidence. I was here for her. The coffee table held nothing but a single sheet of music. Autumn Nocturne. Handwritten, simple, but folded. Read. Reread. There were no clothes in the closet, no food in the fridge, just one bottle of wine on the counter, unopened with 2 glasses beside it. Dust on one, none on the other. She'd been here. Maybe not recently, maybe not alone, but she'd come back to this place, left her number in lipstick, pointed me here without a map, without a voice, because something in that room mattered. I checked the bathroom before I left. 1 toothbrush, 1 towel, no mirror, just silence. The kind you don't escape from. The kind you wait inside until someone knocks. She hadn't left the number for a stranger. She left it for a memory. It wasn't what I expected. When you hear vacant for 2 years, your mind builds a certain picture. Peeling paint, dead air, that smell of things left behind too long. But this place didn't feel dead. It felt paused, like someone had stepped out for a moment and meant to come back. The furniture was minimal, a chair by the window, a small table with nothing on it but the shadow of a long-gone lamp, and in the corner, the piano. It wasn't fancy, upright, mahogany scratched in places, one leg reinforced with a stack of yellowed coasters. But it was clean. Not just wiped down clean, cared for clean. The kind of clean that tells you someone sat here recently, hands on keys, eyes somewhere far from here. The stool was pulled slightly back, angled. Dust patterns don't lie. You could see where it had been dragged. Not far. Just enough for a person to sit. And the keys. Everyone dull with time except one. D above middle C. It caught the light. Polished by use. Or maybe by memory. I sat. Pressed it. It rang out faintly, like it was surprised to be touched again. That's when I noticed the chip. Tiny. Barely a sliver. But there, on the edge of that same D key, like someone once played too hard, or left something heavy on it. A story in ivory no one remembered to tell. The music sheet rested on the piano's ledge. 1 page, no binder. Autumn Nocturne. Not printed, handwritten. Notes curved, notched with care. Not perfect, human. That kind of handwriting doesn't come from a printer. It comes from someone who lived inside the song. I traced the notes with my finger. I don't read music, not fluently. But even I could tell the piece was slow, heavy. Not a song you play for others. A song you play for yourself, in the dark, when no one's listening, and your chest feels heavier than your coat. The rest of the apartment was stripped bare, kitchen unused, cabinets open. No food, no clutter. The bathroom held a single towel and a cracked toothbrush cup. No makeup, no pills, no signs of struggle. Just function. As if the place existed only for one reason, to sit down at that piano, press that chipped key, and let something unspoken out into the air. That was her place. I could feel her there. Not like a ghost, but like a whisper the walls weren't ready to release yet. She didn't live here. She remembered here. Maybe with him. Maybe alone. But someone had returned enough times to make sure the piano stayed in tune. Someone moved that stool. Left the wine bottle on the counter. Cleaned just enough dust off the glass to catch the edge of her mouth. The apartment was empty, but not untouched. And the piano? The piano was still warm. I don't know why I called again. Habit, maybe. Or hope. Most disconnected lines play a tone. Some ring forever. This one had gone straight to dead air the first time. No voicemail, no operator message. Just silence, like the number was holding its breath. But on the 3rd try, something changed. It rang once. Then I heard a voice. "If you're calling about Evelyn, she's not coming back, and neither am I." Click, no replay. No option to leave a message, just a click. Clean, final. I sat there for a second, phone still in my hand, the words rattling around like loose change. It wasn't a greeting. It wasn't even meant to be found. That kind of message is left for one person, a very specific person, which meant I'd stumbled into a conversation that wasn't mine. But now I was in it. The voice was male, mid-range, controlled, American. No accent, no warmth, not angry either. Just resigned. The kind of tone people use when they've rehearsed the line 100 times and never planned on saying it out loud. "If you're calling about Evelyn..." There it was again. Her name, Evelyn. Spoken like a wound someone stopped bleeding but never stitched. The kind of name you only say in past tense. I checked the number again. Traced it backward through the utility databases. Burned out 3 years ago. Belonged to the Chelsea apartment once, then disconnected. No forwarding, no reissue. And yet, the voicemail was active. That doesn't happen on its own. Someone kept that line alive, paid the bare minimum to keep the number dormant, waiting, like a candle lit in a window for someone who would never walk back through the door. I ran the voice through our audio ID system. Nothing. Not on file. No hits in known databases. Either he never spoke to law enforcement, or he made damn sure his name never stuck to his voice. But he knew her. Knew her well enough to record a message like that. Not, Evelyn's not here. Not, you've got the wrong number. No. She's not coming back. And then the knife twist. Neither am I. Which meant he'd left, voluntarily, or disappeared, like her. 2 people, erased in tandem. And I was just now catching the echo. It made me wonder who the message was really for. Not me, not the landlord. Maybe not even her. Maybe it was for the man who wore the gray coat and didn't finish his drink. Maybe it was for the ghost sitting at the piano with 1 chipped key and no mirror in the house. Or maybe it was a confession. Not of guilt, but of surrender. He'd made peace with whatever happened, but I hadn't. Not yet. And now I had a voice. Just not the face to match it. It took 10 days for the prince to come back. That's the kind of thing no one tells you about old cases. How long it takes to match the past with the present. Systems don't talk to each other like they should. Records vanish, names change. But fingerprints, they stay. And hers didn't lie. Evelyn Cross. It hit like a name you thought you'd forgotten but never really did. The kind that hides in the corners of your memory, waiting for the right photograph, the right silence, the right song. I didn't need the file pulled. I already knew the name. Evelyn Cross, jazz singer, mid-90s scene. Had a voice that made people stop chewing their steak. Played lounges that no longer exist. Places that smelled like bourbon and heartbreak. She disappeared in '96 after a show in the Village. One night she was there, the next she was gone. No body, no note, just vanished into smoke. I was a rookie back then, didn't work the case. But I remember the talk, the stories. Everyone had a theory, ran off with a lover, got in too deep with a record label. Mob hit, overdose, witness protection, pick one. She was too beautiful, too talented, too quiet not to become a legend. They declared her dead 5 years later. Quietly, without ceremony. And now, here she was, dead again. Same cheekbones, same hands, same scar above the left brow, stage light accident, according to an old article. Everything matched, except time. 29 years had passed. Her file said she was 28 when she vanished. The woman on the church steps was 57. She'd lived. Somewhere. Somehow. Evelyn Cross had survived her disappearance, which meant someone had helped her do it. And someone else knew she wasn't supposed to come back. The press never got wind of it. I made sure. The moment the print confirmation came through, I locked the report and had it walked to me on paper. No digital trail, no alerts. This wasn't a case anymore. It was something quieter, more sacred. Because a woman like Evelyn doesn't disappear without reason, and she doesn't reappear without purpose. But why now? Why the church steps? Why the dress, the glove, the ring? Why the piano in Chelsea with the chipped key and the untouched glass? She'd built a new life, or maybe borrowed one. And then, at the end of it, left herself to be found not as whoever she'd become, but as who she once was. She wasn't hiding anymore. She was done. And that wasn't the kind of ending you just stumble into. It was a decision. Her name was Evelyn Cross, and she had one last story to tell. I just had to follow her silence long enough to hear it. The file smelled like every case they don't want solved. Dust, ink, and just enough red tape to keep your hands off it. I opened it anyway. Evelyn Cross, missing person. October 1996, last seen exiting the Starlight Room after her second set on a Thursday night. The doorman said she waved to a cab that never stopped. A bartender said she left through the alley. The manager claimed she clocked out early. 3 people, 3 versions. No camera footage, no follow-up. Just gone. But the club? That was the constant. The Starlight Room. It sat in Midtown then, behind a curtain of neon and smoke. Known for velvet booths, whispered deals, and songs that broke your heart. It wasn't just a jazz club, it was a front. Everyone knew it. Run by a man named Vince Morrow, slick hair, silk shirts, and hands too clean for the kind of money he moved. They called him a silent partner. Everyone else just called him untouchable. The Starlight had a long reputation. Mob connections, gambling in the back, cash that never saw a ledger. But the music was real. So was the talent. Evelyn was their star. Played Thursdays. Drew the kind of crowd that made you sit up straighter. And then one night, she vanished. The file said no sign of foul play. That's what they always say when they're not allowed to look deeper. But someone knew. Someone always knows. There was a detective listed on the case, Luis Hart. Retired now. I remembered him. Old school. One of those guys who never played politics but also never got promoted. I found his number in the internal directory. Still picked up on the first ring. "Raines," he said. "You're not calling to say hi." "No," I said. "Evelyn Cross." Dead silence. Then, I told them that file would resurface. "You think she ran?" "No, I think she was helped, either out or under." "Mob?" "Not directly, but she knew things, heard things. That club was a confessional with a liquor license. She was smart enough to listen." "You think she faked it?" "I think someone faked it for her, for a price or a promise." "What kind of promise?" "The kind that keeps you quiet until your voice doesn't matter anymore." He didn't say more. Didn't need to. The file included a single photo of Evelyn on stage, microphone in hand, eyes closed, lost in something only she could hear. The caption scribbled below in faded pencil. October 10th. Last song. Goodbye. You can't write that. She was sending a message before she ever left, maybe to someone watching, maybe to herself. So did she fake her death, or did she escape it? Either way, she stayed gone for nearly 30 years. And now, after all that silence, she'd come back just long enough to make sure someone would start asking again. Someone like me. I didn't expect the photo to mean anything. It was buried in the back of Evelyn's old case file, half torn and paper-clipped to a typed list of early leads that never went anywhere. It showed a group of officers outside the Starlight Room, back when precinct walkthroughs were still a thing they staged for the press. Cops with too much starch in their collars and too much ego in their grins. But there he was, back row, off to the left, gray coat, only younger. His face was sharper then, hair darker, but the posture was the same. Shoulders pulled back like he carried something heavier than his badge. He wasn't smiling. Everyone else was. That's what drew me in. Everyone else looked like they wanted the camera to remember them. He looked like he didn't want to be there at all. I zoomed in. Precinct pin, badge hash 2174. It didn't take long to pull the name. Calder Ross, Internal Affairs. Assigned to an internal sweep in '96 tied to vice unit corruption. Officers pocketing bribes from jazz clubs, gambling dens, anywhere the music drowned out the cash. He wasn't investigating Evelyn. He was investigating the place she worked, the place she disappeared from, and 2 years later, he vanished too, buried in a scandal in '98. Not officially, no charges, just gone. Like someone folded his name into a drawer and forgot to reopen it. Rumor was he'd tried to expose something bigger. Or maybe he took a payout and ran. Depends who you ask. I checked the personnel records. Ross never filed for retirement. No pension, no transfer. His last known residence was a studio walk-up in Brooklyn, cleared out a month after he stopped showing up. No missing person report filed, not even by his own department. Because when internal affairs disappears, no one asks questions. They just hope he's someone else's problem. I went back to the footage from the bar. Same posture, same coat, age-adjusted but unmistakable. He didn't just know Evelyn. He worked the scene around her. He was part of it. And if he went under in '98, that means he stayed hidden longer than she did. Almost 30 years. Which begs the question, why now? Why resurface? Why meet her in a bar after all this time? Was it guilt? Regret? Or was it unfinished business? Either way, Evelyn had left a trail straight to him. Quiet, precise, intentional. She knew I'd find the photo, knew I'd see him, and now I had a name to go with the face. Calder Ross, badge hash 2174. A ghost with a file thicker than most murderers, and a silence that lasted longer than most lives. If he was still alive, he was the key. And if he wasn't, then this case had two funerals. One for her, and one for the truth he helped bury. I followed Ross's trail until it vanished, just like he had. His name didn't show up in any active databases after June of 1998. No tax filings, no lease agreements, no credit card activity, not a single digital whisper. It was like someone had reached into the fabric of the city and plucked him out mid-step. But the NYPD's internal log still had one final note on him. Last seen at Penn Station, 6:40 p.m. southbound train, no follow-up required. That's not how cops leave. You don't just ride off the grid without an exit interview, a badge turn-in, a pension request. Something. But Ross? He left nothing, just a train ticket, purchased in cash, one way to Baltimore, no checked bag, no phone call, no trace. I pulled surveillance stills from that day, grainy, old as hell, time-stamped in the corner like a countdown. There he was. Gray coat, same walk, eyes forward, shoulders square, alone. He passed through the terminal like someone who didn't want to vanish, but had already made peace with the fact that he would. No one reported him missing. No family flagged his absence. His precinct didn't issue a bulletin. Why would they? He worked internal affairs, which means by the time he disappeared, he'd already made enemies. Or mistakes, or both. The working theory back then? He got too close to something. Maybe tried to bring someone down. Maybe someone beat him to it. Maybe he took a payoff to stay silent and leave town. All of it was hearsay. No one wanted the truth. They just wanted him gone. And Evelyn? She disappeared 2 years before him. Same orbit, same city, same club, same silence. I kept circling the connection like a vulture that hadn't decided whether the body was fresh or just well-preserved. She was the star of the Starlight Room. He was the one investigating its backroom dealings. 2 disappearances, 2 silences, too perfect to be coincidence. I checked rail records. No ticket scans after Baltimore, no hotel bookings, no forwarding addresses. Either he changed his name and buried himself in the country, or someone made sure the train was his final stop. But then he showed up again, at the bar. Gray coat, older, thinner, same expression, like the weight of something he'd never said had fused to his spine. He came back for a reason, and now she was dead, not violently, not messily, but with the kind of precision that suggests a curtain being drawn, not by force, but by choice. He knew she was going to die. Maybe not the day, maybe not the place, but he knew. And he came anyway, not to stop it, just to say goodbye. That's the part I couldn't shake. Calder Ross disappeared without a sound, and when he finally reappeared, it was only to witness someone else vanish for good. Not as a detective, not even as a man, but as someone who had already been erased and just came back to see how it ended. I went back to the church alone, didn't tell the precinct, didn't sign out a vehicle, just walked. It was late, that strange New York hour where the traffic thins but the city never really sleeps. The rain from earlier had dried up, and the stone steps where we found her were clean again, like the weather and the church had quietly agreed to move on. But I couldn't. I kept thinking about what the janitor said, how she'd sat in the back pew, still and silent, watching the candle burn. Like she wasn't there to pray, but to leave something behind. I stepped into the sanctuary, the air still thick with incense and echo. The pews were empty, just the sound of my own footsteps and the creak of old wood settling into itself. I walked to the back, to the spot he pointed out. Last pew on the right. And I stood there just breathing it in. She sat here, hours before she died. Not to beg for redemption, but to make peace with the silence. I scanned the area, fingers trailing across the varnished wood. Kneeling bench, faded cushion. Then I picked up the hymnal, thin, well-used, leather cracked at the spine. I flipped through it slowly, page by page, half hoping to find nothing, half praying for a ghost. and there it was. Page 216. Tucked inside, folded twice, was a piece of lined paper. No envelope, no tear marks, just a simple sheet, worn at the crease, but clean. I opened it. 8 words. I couldn't carry the silence anymore. Forgive me. No name, no date, no signature, but I didn't need one. It was hers. I read the line again, slower this time. I couldn't carry the silence anymore. She hadn't written a confession. She'd written a surrender. There's a difference. Confessions ask for cleansing. Surrenders accept that some things can't be cleaned. She wasn't asking for absolution. She was asking for understanding from someone, anyone, who might sit where she sat and see what she saw. Forgive me. That wasn't for God. That was for the one person who should have been with her that night in 1996. The one who vanished 2 years later and only came back when it was already too late. I folded the note, slipped it into an evidence bag, and stared at the empty pew one last time. She hadn't come here to be saved. She'd come to be heard. And if you sat there long enough, if you listened just right, you could almost hear her voice in the silence between the verses. Not singing, not crying, just finished. Justice was the word everyone kept throwing at me. You think we'll get justice for her? The lieutenant asked. You think this ties back to the old corruption case? You think someone's finally going to pay? They didn't get it. This wasn't that kind of case. Evelyn didn't come back for justice. She came back to end something. Quietly, completely, and on her own terms. When you've been gone for nearly 30 years, you don't reappear in a tailored coat and walk to the steps of a church in the rain because you want headlines. You don't sit in a pew for an hour and light a candle unless you're preparing for something that isn't meant to be undone. You don't leave lipstick on a napkin, a chipped piano in a clean apartment, and a note tucked in a hymnal unless you're tying off the last threads of your own story. She didn't want revenge. She wanted release. There was something sacred about the way she arranged it all. Not dramatic, not desperate, just deliberate. Like she had finally made peace with something that refused to let go of her. A weight carried too long, a promise broken too many years ago, a voice that never stopped echoing in the back of her mind. I kept asking myself why she didn't come forward, why she didn't blow the doors off the past and name every man who failed her, why she didn't point at Calder Ross and say, "That's him, he was there, he knew." But maybe that wasn't the story she wanted told. Maybe it never was. She disappeared in 1996 after singing a song called Goodbye. Came back in 2025 and left herself on the steps of the one place that had probably meant something to her before all of it fell apart. That's not someone crying for justice. That's someone putting down the last piece of weight they've been carrying for a lifetime. I went back to the apartment in Chelsea, sat at the piano, pressed that chipped D key, listened to the way it rang out, slightly off, slightly cracked, like it had one note left and was tired of being asked for more. I played the song, not all of it, just the notes I could follow from the sheet music she left. Autumn Nocturne, a song about seasons changing, light fading, and memories that don't quite let you breathe. I didn't play it well, but I played it slow, like she would have. And when the last note faded into the empty room, I finally understood. Evelyn didn't come back for answers. She came to write the ending in her own handwriting. Soft, final, unapologetic, the kind of ending the city would never give her. So she gave it to herself. There's nothing left to file, no warrant to sign, no suspect to chase, no late-night arrest to satisfy the headlines. Evelyn Cross didn't leave us a case. She left us a story. And like most stories worth anything, it wasn't meant to be solved, just heard. I keep thinking about that church pew, the way she sat there with the candle burning low, the city moving outside, and her silence speaking louder than any scream ever could. She didn't leave evidence. She left echoes, a chipped piano key, a lipstick-scrawled number, a folded note no one was supposed to find. She wasn't looking for the law. She wasn't looking to punish. She was looking for someone to listen. And maybe that's all she ever wanted from the beginning. Not to make someone pay, just to make someone understand. The old file stays open on my desk, her photo in black and white, caught mid-note, eyes closed like the song was carrying her somewhere better. I don't know what she went through after 96. I don't know who helped her vanish, or how she found her way back. I don't know why Calder Ross reappeared just long enough to sit beside her in silence and then vanish again like a ghost who knew his final appearance had come and gone. But I do know this. Evelyn Cross carried something that never belonged to her. The weight of other people's silence, the guilt, the secrets, the things she heard behind stage curtains and backroom doors, things she was never supposed to repeat. And in the end, she didn't. She just let it all burn out. No charges, no arrests, no answers that satisfy a report. Just a woman who was lost, and then found, on her terms, in a city that forgot her name until it didn't. The department won't reopen anything. The brass don't like ghosts. There's no fresh evidence, no living suspect, just me, and a file full of half-closed loops. But that's fine. Not every story is supposed to be solved. Some stories, like hers, are meant to haunt. And maybe that's justice in its own quiet way. Not punishment, not headlines. Just the memory of a voice that was almost erased, choosing to speak once more before stepping back into the silence. Evelyn Cross didn't ask to be remembered. She just asked not to be erased. And if no one else will carry that weight, I will. Because the city moves too fast to remember its ghosts. Unless someone makes it stop and listen.